Welcome to the second episode of my podcast. Today we're going to talk some more about habit change. Last time we talked about how to set your goals so that it works for you and why people fail. Today I would like you to get started. In my opinion, the best day to start is today, not tomorrow, not on a specific date, because why not start today, right? Otherwise, it's a bit like we procrastinate. And I think procrastination is a big issue for people. Studies have shown that it's not because people don't know how to start. It's often an emotional issue. We're scared. We're scared of the change. We're afraid of failure. So if you find yourself procrastinating a lot, you probably need to work on your self-esteem or on your level of fear or on your stress. It's usually mostly an emotional issue. Of course, some people have prefrontal cortex issues, so they have trouble planning and staying on track and staying focused. But for most people, procrastination is a sign of fear or stress. If you find yourself procrastinating, try to start with a very small step that doesn't trigger your amygdala, that doesn't trigger your fear in that crazy way. So, if you're about to get started today, what do you need to know about habits? Every habit has a trigger, a routine, and a reward. Those are the element of every single habit on this planet. And I think if you want to change, you should know what is my trigger, what is my routine, and what is my reward. A trigger or cue is a signal in your environment or in your behavior or in the situation that kickstarts and triggers your habit. For example, for me, if I was to have chocolate at home, which I don't because then I eat it, passing by the chocolate and seeing the chocolate is my trigger, and then I eat it. It's as simple as that. I don't have to be necessarily stressed or anything. Give me chocolate and I eat it. It's a very simple combination. So my best advice is, if anything with your goal has to do with sweets and unhealthy food, start in the supermarket. The moment that stuff enters your home, it turns into a trigger for most people. And then you need willpower to stop your behavior. And we know that willpower is just a very inefficient way to run your brain. If anything, don't make your habit rely on willpower. Think about your trigger. If you want to start exercising, you need something that triggers you to start exercising. For example, some people in the morning, instead of changing into regular clothes, they change into gym clothes right away, or they put the gym shoes in front of the bed or something like this. If you want yourself to be triggered into good behavior, you need to build a cue or a trigger into your environment. Depending on what you're trying to change, you need to find a way to make your brain think, oh, here's my trigger. I need to do the activity that I have planned. Whenever I want to remind myself to do something, I think about that trigger. Just be aware that if you're using Post-its or something like this, like a nice little Post-it saying eat more healthily, that's not going to work. Your brain is going to ignore that Post-it soon because it's always the same. It's always there. You didn't follow it yesterday, so it just becomes noise and clutter. I would create a trigger that's a little bit more intelligent. We will look into this more closely, but just be sure that you need to control the trigger, because the trigger is what starts your habit, right? And now the routine itself. Keep it simple. You don't want to have a routine that's overwhelmingly long, overwhelmingly complicated. As we said, you need to be slightly over-challenged. So create a small, nice routine that you can handle. For example, a lot of people learn language with some apps, and they do 5 minutes a day. That's much better than doing 0 minutes per day. So keep it small, keep it like a nice little nugget. If you want to exercise more, you could go on a 10-minute walk, right? Or do a couple of push-ups. I would always start by keeping the routine manageable and in a nice package. When, for example, I decluttered my house, I was procrastinating. In the beginning, it felt like an overwhelming task to declutter a house where 7 people live. So I set a timer to 15 minutes. And I told myself every day I'm going to declutter for 15 minutes. When the bell rings, I drop everything. Often, when the bell rang, I was so in flow that I then didn't drop anything and I just continued. But that was okay. If I had wanted to, I could have stopped at those 15 minutes. And I think you need to really make sure that your routine is something manageable. So here's something important, your reward. Most people punish themselves with their new habit. So many people tell me, oh, in the evening when I'm watching Netflix on the couch, instead of eating chocolate, I'm now going to eat Brussels sprouts. Do you see it? There's no reward. Who wants to eat Brussels sprouts? I mean, it's great, but maybe not as a TV snack. Make sure there's a built-in reward. Your activity has to be fun. You cannot just punish yourself. Your brain will stop it. Your brain is going for the reward. If your goal is to exercise more, then find some kind of exercise that you can actually love and enjoy. Find something that you feel like, oh, I love dancing, or I hate yoga, so I don't do this. For me, for example, yoga is an absolute punishment. It's good for me in theory. I've tried it so many times. Every single time, it really stressed me out. I found it extremely annoying. I know it's good for you, but here's the thing. Exercise is only good for you if you actually enjoy it. If you feel forced to do it, if you hate it, your brain is not going to release the dopamine and all the healthy endorphins associated with exercise if you absolutely hate it. So find something you love, even if it's something like, I'm going to become more organized as I do my taxes. That doesn't sound much fun, but you can flavor it with a little bit of dopamine. You can put on some nice music, make yourself a nice coffee, create a cozy environment where you do your taxes, reward yourself afterwards. Don't punish yourself. Try to be positive about your goal. Try to create a routine that is joyful to some degree, even if you have to engage in something you hate. So don't skip the reward. And speaking of rewards, there's also something called small wins. If you only focus on the end goal, the ultimate thing you're trying to achieve, that's not going to work. You need to find the small joys in your everyday activity. So you need to find a way to enjoy it a little bit every day. Make sure you have those quick wins, those small wins built in, because your brain is not going to delay gratification for 3 months. I would try to really keep it fun. Don't overindulge yourself with big rewards. I think just telling yourself, wow, you did it, I'm proud of myself, goes a long way. Self-efficacy matters. The story you tell yourself matters. So for some people, just checking it off on the to-do list is gold. I think that is fun because we get that little dopamine reward. So there needs to be some kind of reward. And here's the thing. If you're trying to stop something, make sure to substitute the activity with something else. So you need to define a new behavior that will substitute your old behavior, and it needs to involve a reward. If all you do is trying to suppress and inhibit the activity you've done before, it's not going to work. In the brain, habits are neuronal networks, neurons that fire together, basically. So when you engage in an activity over a longer period, those pathways in the brain grow stronger. And over time, they become like a highway in your brain, a very stable connection. That's why they're so energy efficient. And that's why they're so easy, and why you can transfer that habit from your prefrontal cortex to your basal ganglia and do them on autopilot. So your brain loves that. When you engage in a new habit, your brain has to make new connections between neurons, and that's energy intensive. Suppressing a very stable and strong and rewarding activity is doomed to fail. Your prefrontal cortex has to suppress and spend all the energy on the inhibition, and that's a waste of your energy. Instead of inhibiting the undesired behavior, try to do something else instead and build up that neuronal network. In the beginning, it's going to be like a little trail in the forest that nobody ever walks on. Over time, it gets bigger and more stable. So instead of focusing on what not to do, find something you can do instead. If you're a smoker, for example, You probably enjoy that little break from work. And maybe you also engage with some coworkers and have some office gossip while you're taking your break. If instead you're staying at your desk working and just thinking of cigarettes, you just punish yourself. I mean, that's great if you can focus, but probably chances are you're not. So you need to think of something else. That's why so many people gain weight, because instead of smoking, they start eating. I'm not necessarily recommending this, but you need to find something. You can go on a little walk, do some push-ups, or watch a funny movie for 5 minutes, get that dopamine flowing. So you be creative. But if your goal is to stop something, you need to find an alternative. Inhibition doesn't work. Let's talk about visualization. We all know athletes do it, and there is some power to it because in your brain, when you visualize something, it activates those networks. Not exactly as if you were doing them, but it's pretty close. So what this means is that you could visualize yourself doing the activity. You could visualize yourself reaching that goal. And in some cases, it's actually effective to visualize your failure. That sounds horrible, I know, but in the brain, nothing motivates more than fear. You just shouldn't overdo it. From an evolutionary perspective, we are wired to seek the reward, but we are even more destined to avoid the punishment and to avoid danger. It's the negativity bias in the brain. Sometimes it can be very effective, especially if you're procrastinating and you're not putting in the effort, to think about how you will feel and what will happen if you don't reach your goal, and then focus on that. So positive thinking is a good idea sometimes, but not always. For example, these self-affirmations where we say, oh, I'm beautiful, I'm smart, all of that, they do work. But here's the caveat. They only work if you believe in them. So think about it. If you tell yourself, I'm beautiful, but deep inside you feel ugly, it's going to create cognitive dissonance in your brain. And that's horrible. That's just noise in your brain and makes you less effective, makes you lose energy. So if you work with affirmation and visualization, you better believe in it deep down in your subconscious. Don't lie to your brain. Your brain is smart enough to look through that and then will sabotage your efforts. There was a study where they asked students to engage in positive affirmations prior to taking a test, or even maybe during a test. What they found was that when students said, I'm smart, I'm successful, it only worked for those students who already were very confident. The students who had fear of failure and the ones who were afraid to not do well didn't benefit. For them, the impact was worse. It made them perform worse. So be very careful if you want to work with affirmations. You need to choose affirmations that you can actually believe in. Don't lie to your brain. And here, maybe a couple of final tips. I think it's good to be aware of your natural preferences. I'm a morning person, so I have the highest levels of energy in the morning. So whenever I try to do something new that requires a tiny little bit of willpower, I will do that in the morning, right? And not schedule it for the evening when I'm tired and depleted. Look for those moments in your day when you have the most energy naturally, and schedule your new activity into one of those positive windows. Think about whether you're a morning person or an evening person, when you get those natural bursts of energy, and don't burden your brain with additional willpower at a moment when you're already tired. That's one thing to really be mindful of when you have the most energy, and to schedule your activity so that you can follow through with it in moments of high energy. That's it for today. I hope it's been useful. In the next episode, I will talk about staying on track, because a lot of people set goals, they get started, but then after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, they stop engaging and they drop it. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about how you can stay on track. See you there.